Hi, I'm Tim. He's Marcus, and welcome to Watchbox. Today on Collector Conversations, we're talking what's new, places he'd never go, how he got his start, and what's on his radar today. Marcus, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I find that a lot of these collector interviews, they kind of work like superhero movies, and the origin story always comes first, but let's cut to the sequel. Since we're well into the 2020 model year and you're an advanced collector, what's on your radar right now? Like, what are you thinking of adding to the collection? And do you have a theme?
I don't particularly have a theme. What's definitely on the radar is I'm 100% set on the new Ed White, the 321 reissue that Omega came out, and I felt that was one of the releases of the year for sure. I really like the idea of the 321, and I think that's and I like the idea that we have it in a non-vintage version because. For me, vintage is it's kind of a pool I don't want to really dip my toes in because I feel like the history is someone else's with that watch, and so I like the idea of having the original caliber, remade in a modern version, and so that I can make my own history, but yet at the same time it goes back to the history of the moon landing, it goes back to the history of the original Speedmaster, all those things.
It is a spectacular watch, and I have to say, even though everyone was talking about Snoopy this year, and I guess that's to be expected, I really thought that the Ed White was kind of almost like a sleeper hit, almost like as impressive as it was, it flew under the radar with everyone talking about the Snoopy 3. Did you ever think of the Snoopy 3, or were you just dead set on the 321?
I was dead set on the 321, but I then became one of those guys. Then I went to my AD after like having put on my name onto the list for the 321 2 months prior. I just said, you know what, I don't want to be one of those guys. Let's get me the Ed White first, and then I would like consideration for the Snoopy. He was nice enough to say, you know what, I'm just gonna put your name down for both. So I wasn't discerning enough to to sit out the Snoopy. So I love that watch too. I think that I had very low hopes for that watch, honestly. If you think about it, if you told me that the Snoopy that Omega announced in like teased in April and then announced in October, it was going to be stainless steel. It was not going to have a bracelet. It was not going to have a display case back. It was not going to be a limited edition, and they were going to charge over $10,000. I would have said pass. But I think they added enough interesting things to it, and the Panda dial was charming. I think Panda is a little bit overdone, to be honest, in my opinion, but it was quite charming. It didn't have the that kind of elan of the Silver Snoopy 2, but it had it had its own unique charm. I think that they introduced enough about it that made it a worthy successor, but I don't think it quite nipped the Silver Snoopy in terms of best in that series. I think it's kind of like the current the Porsche Spider versus the Carrera GT, right? The Carrera GT is always going to kind of be the GOAT. So the Spider's got more tech and spec in it, but there's something so analog about the Silver Snoopy 2 that I can't quite put it ahead, but I still love the 3 for its own merit.
And that's kind of a good way to look at it. It's kind of funny because I always thought that blue dials were played out and panda dials were played out, and somehow Omega combined the two of them in the Snoopy and it works.
Yeah.
So I did feel that way. And I guess as your collection has grown, it's probably begun to take on a little bit of the character of the collector. Could you give us an overview of some of your favorite pieces in the collection right now?
I actually have a very, very small collection. So usually I rotate through 3. So I'm just do a quick wrist check today. So since they pay for our pixels, I've got a watch box purchased Moser Perpetual with the Ardoise dial in platinum. I think I've commented on the video that you did. I've rewatched it 100 times, but this is from Watchbox. So I think that for me, Moser, even when I was starting out, I had the watch that got me into watches was the JLC Perpetual Master Ultra Thin, the Doctor Strange watch. That just got me because I saw the movie, I saw all the special effects, the watch itself, and how they sort of teased the gears as they were the fight scenes and all that scene like they were fighting inside inside of a watch or a clock. It was fantastic. And then I saw the watch that got me going. And then I sort of looked into watches a little bit. I saw this on a different channel, but they touched on the Perpetual. So it kind of starting out, even though I never imagined spending the kind of money to get a Perpetual, those kind of were the Moser Perpetual, just based on my early YouTube viewings, and the JLC Master Ultrason Perpetual. I ended up getting this one because of how special I find it to be. I think that it's, as you say, first, those flags fly forever. It's the first bi-directional flash dates Perpetual. It's got an 8-day power reserve. It's a manual wind. And but with this Moser, I just wind it once a week. It's got a 9-day power reserve. I wind it at the start of every week, leave it in the box, pick it up whenever I want, and then rolls back to Sunday, and it's the same thing over.
I'm curious, do you find yourself drawn to complications in general? Because we've talked about 2-year watches so far. And by the way, thank you for mentioning the Doctor Strange. I started with the superhero metaphor and you pretty much completed it. So boom, we're on track there. Do you have a collection of complications, or is that something that's a newer evolution in your collecting tastes?
I don't think I gravitate towards complications per se. I think that just the idea of a simple 3-hander is very appealing to me. I've got a couple of them in the collection as well, manual wind and quartz even. So I like the appeal of the 3-hander. And for me, I think that I think I'm just going to pick what appeals to me, to be honest. I think I like the idea that of the whole picture, holistic kind of je ne sais quoi kind of thing. It's got to strike me. It's got to be like lightning striking me. I don't like to check boxes off or anything like that.
So it's fair to say that you're more of an intuitive and emotional collector than a calculating, premeditated collector. I was always the guy who had a roadmap. I knew the next watch and the next watch and the next watch. So let me just ask you, could you take us on a little bit of a journey from your early days as a collector and how your kind of intuitive sensibility led to the accumulation of the collection? Take us right back to the beginning. How'd you get into watches?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll spare going into too much detail, but like how I always wore a watch since I was a kid. I love that. Timex Ironman, the usual stuff. Timex Ironman, G-Shock, those kind of things. My fidget spinner. You start the chronograph in the Ironman and you try to stop it as quickly as possible while you're getting bored in class. But it was really 2016 with the movie. I started looking into automatic watches. Went through the usual stuff, right? So Seiko, a couple of Seikos. I got a Tag Heuer, but that was kind of my early kind of deciding where my tastes were. And then I jumped straight into JLC, to be honest. I jumped straight into JLC. Like I think I bought 3 JLCs before I bought my first Rolex. First one I bought was it was a vintage LeCoultre. I think it was a Master Mariner from 1964 or something like that. And that was my literally my only only dip into the vintage pool. And
Cool.
I found it was too delicate, and that's kind of what colored my current impression of vintage. It just didn't have the robustness that today's watches did. So the second one I had was the previous generation Master Calendar Moon. So that's the one that had the triple calendar with the moon phase and the power reserve before they took off the power reserve. And then I had a JLC, the Reverso Grand High, Sun and Moon. So the big one, the limited edition that I think came out it was the early 2000s. So I bought all of those before I got my first Rolex. So I moved on from those, and those are gone in the collection. And actually, those went towards trading for an FP Journe that I used to trade for this. So that's where those kind of went to. Then I got into Rolexes. I got a couple of Rolexes, the Air King and the Sub. And I ended up selling the Sub, and I managed to pick up one of these before the hype got too crazy. So the next watch,
Here it comes.
We've got the Chrono Blue.
The eagle has landed. Is that the only Journe in your collection?
No. So my significant other kind of shares my collection, so she released this to me for today just to let people see it. So
It's the best, Journe.
yeah, so I was able to so I traded kind of all my, I ended up selling all my entry level pieces, and to partially fund this, and I was still able to get this at list. So that was, I think it was last year. But she was the one that kind of encouraged me to add the Elegant. So
Well, let's see, between the Chronometre Bleu and the Elegant, I mean, you're 2 for 2 on call on the market. Could you buy me a lotto ticket? But yeah, keep taking me through your collection. You mentioned that you've got a Rolex Air King.
Well, that one got sold. The only Rolex I have, it's the Pepsi. Funny story, my girlfriend actually got that from me from the dealer. She's much more likable apparently to the 80s than I am. So she made friends with one of the sales associates, and then put my name down for that. But I had my name down. She put my name down for two, so it was the Hulk and the Pepsi. And I was actually with her when actually the call went to her, but she was with me. And then so she got the call and she started doing her happy dance, and she said, we'll be right there, and she hung up. And I actually didn't know which one I got. We were driving to the boutique, and I didn't know which watch I was going to buy until I got there. But that was, well, but I really like this one. It's I think Rolex is both underrated and overrated in the watch community, and I think that we kind of touch on that in our chats.
Yeah, and for those of you who are wondering, we regularly correspond on the Tim Masso Facebook group. It's where the fun continues after the live stream ends. But I agree with you, saying Rolex is kind of underrated and overrated. Kind of the image elements and the, I guess, conspicuous consumption elements are overrated, but the quality and the integrity, the solidity of what you actually get, that the actual watch might be underrated as a product, not as an image or a totem of status, but as a product itself. I definitely see where you're coming from with that. So yeah, they are really robust. And do you see yourself becoming a Rolex collector, or is it going to be more a one-off?
I think it's going to be a one-off. I know I said I don't really have check boxes, but I kind of look at, when I make a decision, I kind of look at a little bit at the inflection points, value inflection points where, you know, for me, I feel like for this model specifically, I really love the Pepsi because it's so comfortable. And I honestly think that Rolex does GMTs better than just about anyone. Like in my price range, I feel like this is the best GMT I could have bought, without getting into something like a Patek, you know, like an Aquanaut dual time or something like that, which is, you know, a size of, you know, a price tier above.
So let me ask you, do you have like an in or out rule, or, you know, do you believe that one watch in, one watch out to maintain an equilibrium? Some guys never sell. I know some guys who never sell, and their watch collections like take over their house, because first you've got the watches, then you've got the boxes. And when you never sell, the boxes take over your house. So how many watches is too many watches for you?
How many watches is too many watches? I cheat. I'll say this. Once my girlfriend takes a watch, even though it's technically ours, I don't count it in my collection. So when I tell people I've currently got 3 watches. So I've got the Pepsi, I've got the Moser, and I've got the Chrono Bleu. And she wears the other Journe. She wears the Batman, and on occasion she wears the Oyster Perpetual. So I don't count the Batman. I don't count the the Elegant as part of my collection. So technically I've 3 watches, and 2 are incoming, the Snoopy and the Ed White. So I think 5 is a good number. I suspect that the Snoopy will be a medium term hold. It's kind of going to be one of those lease watches where you hold it for 2 to 3 years and then kind of move it on when something else comes in. And I was very, you know, open with my AD about that. I was saying, you know, this is going to get flipped at some point. I'm not going to flip it. You're not going to see this, you know, a month on the secondary market, but, you know, 2-3 years, and he was fine with that. So I try and be as transparent as possible with my AD. So Yeah, I think 5 is a good number for me.
No, that's a good philosophy, and it's remarkably disciplined. When I was going with like the big collection philosophy, I was thinking like 10, 11, 12, but you seem to have this I think not quite down to a science, but you definitely know where you're going with it. So let's talk about the future. Beyond the Ed White, the caliber 321 that's on its way, beyond adding a Snoopy, what are long-term prospects for you, or if we might even say grail watches on your horizon?
Um, Probably the, the Grail is the 15202. I think I've always loved the Royal Oak, but I I didn't really appreciate the finishing on the 3120. I've held all three of the big boys in hand. I've seen the finishing, and I totally agree with you. The 3120 probably comes in third, compared to the overseas and obviously the 324, and it's probably even fifth if you add in kind of the Blancpain 1315 and you add in the new Longo Odysseus. I think the Longo Odysseus is it's the big dog now in terms of finishing. It's head and shoulders above the even Patek Vacheron. But the 2121 is a different story, right? The appeal to me is exactly the same as the Ed White. It's that if you had to go to a caliber, like, this is always going to be under debate, but it's there a caliber that's the Michael Jordan, the greatest of all time. The 2121's got to be up there, right? It's present in all the three stainless steel sports watches. The original is JLC sourced. It remains, the thinnest full rotor movement in the world today. Even 40, 50 years after the fact. So that's as a collector, I know that it's the Royal Oak's a bit cliche, but as a collector, I think that you got to look at the 2121.
I love the fact you're very open-minded about what kind of watches you add. What advice would you give to new collectors starting out?
I think definitely don't rush. Buy watches you like, but maybe limit the number. But I would say keep it to, if you can, 3 new watches in a year. Buy something that you like. Buy well. Try and buy pre-owned. Ask a lot of questions. Because I think that I've come around. I was very critical of my early collecting phase, and I was saying, why did I buy that, or why did I buy that, or why did I buy that? I regret it, but I don't also, because the enjoyment that I got at that time was definitely there. I just wish I hadn't bought so many watches.
It's like
Sure.
chugging 18-year bonded bourbon. Slow down, savor it,
Yeah.
get the taste, the
Yeah.
palate, the finish. So, it's
And buy a small watch box. Buy 5 watch box, and because I bought like 10 and it filled up so fast, and before I knew it, I was just, what am I doing? And then I was like, I'm not wearing half these watches. And then my OCD started kicking in, and then I had to trim.
I realize that I've had watches that have come and have go, and you and I have both sold watches into and out of the collection, but there's some watches that are just eternal. They're attached to a memory or a life milestone. Do you have a watch like that, or watches like that, just things you'll never sell? And could you share with us why?
It's probably the blue. I think the blue is the one that'll stay in the collection forever. Not just because of how hot it is, not just because of how rare it is, but I think it's the memory, because it's the memory and the relationship that I cultivated with my AD. I wasn't a big spender or anything like that, and you hear all these horror stories about Rolex ADs, Patek ADs, AP ADs, Journe ADs turning their nose up at first time buyers. And you know what? I just went in. I asked about it, and I asked about it. There was probably a year or two wait list on it. But I just asked about it. I went in, talked to him, had a real conversation about watches, what I loved about it, and you know what? He got it for me. Like, I obviously had to wait, but I didn't have to spend 5-6 figures at the AD, and I think he trusted me not to move it on, and so that's something that I'm just not going to move on. I know that there's crazy prices on it, but I can't see anything short of financial ruin, knock on wood, that leaving. It hits the back of the mind. People ask, are you moving out of your CB? and for the most part, it's no. Just because of it's probably the height of my collecting journey. For me, it's the most memorable part of my collecting journey was getting the call for that blue.
Okay, so let me ask you, we marry our watches, and I think that's kind of what happens when we make the decision to spend a lot of money. You mentioned it's kind of a leap of faith spending, 5 figures on a watch, and I definitely agree with you. I was in that position where I'm like, oh my God, am I going to do this? In terms of dating, in terms of watches you would like to experience or brands you would like to try, not necessarily Ed, what do you find intriguing? You mentioned Laurent Ferrier earlier. Could you tell me a little bit about that curiosity and whether it applies to any other brands?
I think I love the finishing. And I think you and I think that oftentimes we conflate movement finishing with movement architecture. For me, Laurent Ferrier hits both. It's the architecture is beautiful. It's a beautifully laid out movement, and the finishing it stacks up against any high horology house, any independent. For me, it stacks up without a doubt. I think that if they put the Gallet Traveler into the Sports Tourbillon case, I might have to look at selling off my Rolexes and maybe the other Journe. I don't know if they ever did that, but they haven't yet. So that would be a dream watch that doesn't exist.
Hey, what if watches sometimes happen? I remember 2 years ago, I'm like, you know what? Omega should bring back the Caliber 321. And literally 24 hours later, it came out and people thought I had like insider knowledge. I'm like, no, I guess.
I think I remember that. I was in Singapore and I was watching that live stream.
Well, Marcus, thank you so much. I think we're going to have to do a sequel as your new pieces arrive to update the collection. Do you have any parting thoughts?
You can follow me on Penultimate Watch. And I am a regular cast member on the Amin Reviews live stream every Wednesday at 9 p.m. And I'm also sometimes show up on the Bobby Legs channel. So I thought I'd give those guys a shout out since yeah.
Good. I'm glad you did. And be sure to check those out and also check out the Talking Time with Tim Masso Facebook group where
Absolutely.
You can find both of us. All right, Tim out, Marcus out, time out. Thanks for logging on.